She laughed when I picked her up in my old car, a faded blue Civic that had more heart than horsepower. She covered her nose dramatically, snapped a photo for her friends, and said, "You really drive this?" I laughed it off, but the sound stayed with me long after she got out that night. High heels clicking away like a clock counting down my pride. I wasn't poor, just patient. Every dollar I made went into something bigger, something she couldn't see. She wanted fast money, loud luxury, the kind that shines brighter than loyalty. So, when she walked away for a man with a newer car and an emptier soul, I didn't chase her. I built. I worked. I waited. And the day I drove past her, roof down, engine roaring, her disbelief reflected in my rearview mirror, I didn't smile for revenge. I smiled for closure. The night she laughed at my car, the city smelled like rain and gasoline. Street lights blurred through the drizzle, and the radio hummed softly beneath the sound of her impatience. She sat beside me in her red dress, scrolling on her phone, sighing louder than the engine. "Can you open the window?" she asked. "It doesn't roll down properly," I said. She wrinkled her nose. "Of course it doesn't." That sentence, "of course it doesn't," was the quiet death of something I'd mistaken for love. Her name was Melissa. We'd met at a friend's birthday party 6 months earlier. She was confident, magnetic, and used to getting attention without asking for it. When she smiled, you felt chosen. When she frowned, you felt dismissed. I used to think she liked me for my calmness, the way I didn't chase her like everyone else. Now I realize she liked me because I was easy to measure against others. A mirror that made her feel richer. That night, we were supposed to celebrate her promotion, a new job at a real estate firm. She wanted to go to a rooftop bar downtown, somewhere with valet parking and neon cocktails. I said we could grab dinner at the small Thai place near my apartment, her favorite, ironically. She looked at me as though I'd just offered her a cardboard box instead of a seat. "You're 27, she said flatly. "When are you going to stop living like a college student?" "I'm investing," I told her. "Every extra dollar goes into the business." She laughed. "Your startup?" "Our startup," I corrected softly. She gave me that pitying smile people reserve for stray dogs. "You've been saying that for 2 years, Ethan. Maybe it's time to get a real job." When she climbed out of my Civic in front of her apartment, she leaned against the door frame, hair gleaming under the porch light. "I just need someone who's already made it," she said. "Not someone still trying." I nodded. "Thanks for being honest. I'm not trying to hurt you." "You already did," I said, and drove away before she could see the way my jaw trembled. That night, the city felt crueler than usual. Every luxury car that sped past seemed to mock me. Every billboard flashed success stories written in fonts I couldn't yet afford. I parked the Civic in the cracked lot behind my apartment, sat there in the dark, and let the rain hit the windshield until it blurred everything. The buildings, the memories, the noise. I wasn't angry at her. Not really. I was angry at myself for letting her laughter matter so much. I had 2 options. Let that moment define me or let it ignite me. So I did what I always did when the world doubted me. I went back to work. I've been building an app with my college friend, Sam, a platform that connected small local artisans to customers directly, cutting out the middlemen that ate their profits. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't funded, but had heart. For months we'd been pitching to investors, collecting rejections like souvenirs. Too niche, too local, too small. That night, I opened my laptop, stared at our prototype, and thought, fine. If they think it's too small, I'll make it so big they can't ignore it. I didn't sleep. I redesigned our interface, rewrote our proposal, and drafted a business plan that bled truth. When dawn came, my screen glowed with something that finally looked like possibility. Sam showed up at 9 a.m., bleary-eyed and skeptical. "You look like you wrestled a thunderstorm." "I might have," I said. "We're changing everything." We worked for weeks, eating noodles from styrofoam boxes, fueled by coffee and determination. I sold my old gaming setup, canceled subscriptions, stopped eating out. Every cent went into keeping the dream alive. Sam showed up at 9 a.m., bleary-eyed and skeptical. "You look like you wrestled a thunderstorm." "I might have," I said. "We're changing everything." We worked for weeks, eating noodles from styrofoam boxes, fueled by coffee and determination. I sold my old gaming setup, canceled subscriptions, stopped eating out. Every cent went into keeping the dream alive. Some nights, I still heard Melissa's laugh echo in my head, that sharp, shallow sound. But instead of pain, it became pressure, a motivator, the sound that kept me coding past midnight. 3 months later, our big break came unexpectedly. A boutique owner we'd been courting decided to list her handmade jewelry on our platform. Her designs went viral on social media, and overnight, traffic exploded. Orders poured in faster than we could process them. We barely slept for a week, fulfilling orders, upgrading servers, hiring 2 interns. The chaos was beautiful. For the first time, I felt the hum of real success. Not imagined, not someday, but now. One evening, as I was packing the last shipment, Sam said, "Remember when Melissa said you should get a real job?" I smiled. Yeah, I took her advice. I just created one. 6 months later, our platform was featured in a national business magazine. Investment offers arrived daily. We chose carefully, not the biggest offer, but the right one. The deal closed at 7 figures. The day the wire transfer cleared, I went to the same Thai restaurant she'd refused that night. I ordered her favorite dish, sat alone, and toasted quietly to the ghost of who I used to be. Outside the window, a luxury car passed, sleek, loud, forgettable. I smiled. It wasn't about showing off anymore. It was about becoming the man I promised myself I'd be. Still, closure has its own sense of timing. A few weeks later, I saw her again, at a gas station of all places. She was standing beside a man's Mercedes, scrolling her phone, waiting for him to finish pumping gas. When she looked up and saw me, her expression flickered, surprise, then discomfort, then the practiced smile of someone unsure which mask to wear. "Ethan," she said. "Wow, it's been a while." "Yeah," I said, keeping my tone calm. "How have you been?" "Oh, busy, traveling, the usual." Her voice had that same polished indifference. Then her eyes dropped to my car, the Civic. Still there, still faithful. "You still drive this?"
Yeah,
she asked. I said, starting the engine. "It's paid off." She laughed lightly, but it didn't sound like victory anymore. It sounded defensive. "Anyway," she said, "maybe we should catch up sometime." "Maybe," I replied and drove off. The truth was, I didn't feel triumphant or wounded. Just done. What I didn't tell her was that I'd already placed an order for a new car, not as a statement, but as a symbol. A Lamborghini Huracan, bright orange, paid for in cash. Because sometimes you don't need revenge. You just need evolution. That night, as I looked at the purchase confirmation on my screen, I whispered to myself, let her see it when it's meant to be seen. And life, as always, had perfect timing. The morning my Lamborghini was delivered, the neighborhood stopped breathing for a second. The rumble of the engine didn't sound like noise. It sounded like closure forged in metal. But this story isn't about the car. It's about everything that came before that roar. After Melissa left, I became allergic to excuses. Every sunrise meant a deadline. Every rejection email became caffeine. The startup wasn't just a dream anymore. It was survival with Wi-Fi. Sam and I moved into a small office space. Bare walls, folding tables, 2 computers, and 1 cheap coffee machine that sounded like it was dying every morning. But inside those walls, we built something unshakable. When investors saw our momentum, they called us back. The same ones who once said too small now said innovative. Funny how money changes vocabulary. We signed another funding round, $3.6 million, Series A. It didn't feel like luck. It felt like proof. Success doesn't arrive with confetti. It arrives disguised as exhaustion. There were nights I slept on the office couch, dreaming about the Civic's engine whining like a reminder of where I'd started. There were mornings when I'd wake up to sunlight hitting the whiteboard, and for a second, I'd forget the pain that fueled it all. That's how growth happens, quietly, while you're too busy surviving to notice you've already evolved. Our team expanded. We hired developers, marketing leads, and a brand director who insisted we needed a new tagline. Sam laughed and said, "How about built out of heartbreak, powered by caffeine?" I told him, that's not bad, just maybe not for investors. We eventually chose one that stuck. From local hands to global hearts. The day that tagline went live on our website, orders came in from 8 different countries. 2 years after that rainy night, everything looked different. I'd moved into a penthouse downtown. Nothing excessive, just peaceful. Floor-to-ceiling windows, city lights below, and silence that didn't ache anymore. The Civic still sat in the garage, parked beside a brand-new black SUV I'd bought for my mother. I couldn't bring myself to sell the Civic. It wasn't a car anymore. It was a chapter. One morning, I woke up to an email from Forbes. They wanted to do a feature on self-made entrepreneurs under 30. My face would be on a page that once belonged to people I used to idolize. I called Sam, half laughing, half stunned. He said, "Told you the Civic would get you somewhere." I smiled. Yeah, just took a few detours. The photo shoot was at a luxury car showroom. Ironic, I know. Rows of Lamborghinis, Ferraris, and McLarens lined the space like a cathedral for speed. The photographer asked, "Do you want to pose with one?" I almost said no. Then I thought about that night. Melissa's laughter, her disdain for effort disguised as taste. I looked at the bright orange Huracan in the corner and said, "That one." The photographer smiled. "Good choice. It suits you." At that moment, it wasn't about vanity. It was about full-circle poetry. The car wasn't a trophy. It was punctuation at the end of a long, bruising sentence. The article dropped a month later. Ethan Cole, the man who turned local commerce into global power. The picture of me leaning casually on the Lamborghini flooded my social feeds. Comments poured in, former classmates, mentors, even strangers. But buried between the praise was a message I didn't expect. "Melissa, wow, you really did it. Congratulations. I'm proud of you." I stared at the message for a long time. No anger, no thrill, just quiet understanding. I typed back, "Thanks. I hope you're doing well." She replied with a heart emoji, the same empty symbol she used to send when I meant something to her. I didn't respond. The lesson was already learned. A week later, fate decided to test me again. I was leaving a business event at the Hilton downtown. My car waited in the valet lane, a sight that still made my inner child grin. As I handed the valet ticket, I heard a familiar voice behind me. I turned. Ethan. Melissa stood there in a sleek dress, holding the arm of a man in a tailored suit. Her hair was longer now, her confidence thinner. The man's watch probably cost more than my first year of rent. "Melissa," I said evenly. "It's been a while." She smiled, but her eyes darted to the car behind me. The Lamborghini purred into place, sunset gleaming across its body like liquid fire. The valet stepped out, keys in hand. The man beside her raised an eyebrow. "Nice ride." I took the keys, nodding. "Thanks. It's a long story." Melissa's smile faltered. "You finally got your dream car." "Yeah," I said, opening the door. "But it stopped being about cars a long time ago." She hesitated. "Ethan, I didn't mean to." "I know," I said gently. "You just refused to sit in something that didn't shine yet. Now it does." The light turned green. I got in, started the engine, and drove away, slowly, not to show off, but to make sure she heard the sound of evolution. In the rearview mirror, she stood frozen, the reflection of my taillights glowing red against her disbelief. For the first time, her silence didn't hurt. It healed. That drive home was different. The streets I once crawled through in a rusty Civic now blurred beneath the roar of victory. But instead of pride, what filled me was peace. Because revenge stops feeling good when you realize you've outgrown the person you were trying to prove wrong. I pulled into my garage, parked beside the SUV, and sat there for a while. I ran my fingers along the steering wheel, feeling the smooth leather under my palms. This wasn't payback. It was perspective. Some people chase wealth to replace love. I chased purpose and found both, because passion, when fueled by pain, turns into legacy. That night, I called Sam. "She saw me," I said. He laughed. "Let me guess, at a gas station again?" "Hotel valet." "Better lighting," he said. "So, how'd it feel?" I thought about it. Peaceful, like I closed the door without slamming it. He went quiet for a second. "You're not that kid in the Civic anymore." "No," I said softly, "but I'll always remember him." Weeks later, I visited my mother. She stood by the window, smiling as I pulled up in the Lamborghini. "Fancy," she teased. "It's just metal, Mom." "Maybe." but I can see you glowing brighter than the car. I laughed. That's the goal. We drove to dinner together, just me and her. I offered to let her sit in the driver's seat. She declined, saying, I've already seen you drive far enough. When we got home, I looked up at the night sky. The city hummed beneath me, alive and restless. I thought of everyone who had doubted me, mocked me, underestimated me. And then I thought of the people who didn't care about what I drove, only about who I became. Those were the real treasures. The Lamborghini was a symbol, yes, but not of revenge. It was a becoming, because she refused to sit in my old car, but that refusal made room for someone else, someone who would never care what I drove, only how I arrived. And someday, when I met her, I'd tell her this story, not as a confession, but as a reminder. Sometimes heartbreak doesn't break you. It builds your engine. Success has a strange quietness to it when you've earned it. It doesn't roar like a crowd. It hums like an engine in control. My life had finally reached that rhythm, steady, grounded, and finally mine. Months passed after the hotel entrance encounter. The startup was no longer new. It was established. We'd opened offices in Singapore and Berlin. Investors who once ignored my emails now flew halfway across the world for a meeting. My name appeared on panels, interviews, and articles about the new age of digital entrepreneurs. But beneath all of it, there was one rule I kept sacred: stay real. Because I'd seen what fake looked like, and I'd built an empire to prove authenticity lasts longer than luxury ever could. Still, life has a funny way of looping back to test whether you've really moved on. It was a Friday evening when my past came calling, literally. I was leaving the office when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but something in me, curiosity, maybe made me pick up. Ethan, her voice. Softer, almost broken. Melissa. I didn't know who else to call, she said, breath catching. Can we talk? For a moment, I just stood there in the dim office light, my reflection staring back from the window. The old me would have hung up or gloated. The new me just said, Are you okay? She sighed. No, not really. We met at a cafe downtown, the same one we'd visited years ago when we still believed in each other. She arrived late, but not in the way she used to. Not fashionably, hesitantly. Her once perfect hair was tied back loosely. Her makeup was faint, her confidence flickering like a candle in a draft. Thank you for coming, she said. I nodded. You sounded upset. She looked down. He left me. I didn't ask who. I already knew. The man from the Mercedes. The upgrade that came with conditions. He said I wasn't ambitious enough, she continued bitterly. That I wasn't worth the effort anymore. I stayed quiet. She laughed once dryly. I guess karma drives faster than I thought. She looked up then, eyes glossy but defiant. You must think I deserve it. I took a breath. I don't think about what people deserve. I think about what they learn. She frowned. So what did you learn? That success built on bitterness doesn't last, I said gently. You either evolve or you end up haunted by what you tried to escape. She swallowed hard, staring at her coffee. You changed. I had to. Do you ever miss me? She asked quietly. I thought about it. The night spent coding instead of sleeping. The taste of cheap coffee and determination. The sound of her laughter turning to motivation. No, I said finally. I miss who I was before I needed to prove anything. She nodded slowly, tears threatening to fall. You always were too good for me. I smiled sadly. No, I was just still growing. When I left that cafe, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. Because closure isn't revenge. It's peace that doesn't need an audience. Over the next few months, life kept rising. Our company launched an initiative to help small-town creators open online stores. It was my mother's idea, help others who remind you of where you started. She was right, as always. We called it the Drive Fund because no one should have to apologize for having a slow start. That project became my pride, more than the profits or cars or awards. For the first time, my success didn't feel like running from something. It felt like running towards something better. One morning, I received an invitation to speak at a business summit. The theme, resilience from failure to fortune. It felt fitting. When I walked onto that stage, I didn't talk about money, market share, or cars. I talked about humility, about starting with nothing but belief in a rusting Honda Civic. The world will laugh at your car, I said, glancing at the audience. It'll laugh at your dream, your timing, your persistence. Let them, because one day they'll call it your story. Applause filled the hall, not the shallow kind that ends when the lights dim, but the kind that stays with you. Afterward, a young man approached me, nervous, hands trembling. "Sir," he said, "I wanted to quit last week. Your story changed my mind." And that moment meant more than any Lamborghini ever could. Later that evening, as I drove home, I passed the same street where Melissa once laughed at my old car. The lamppost still flickered, the sidewalk still cracked, but everything else had changed. I slowed down for a second, watching the ghost of that night replay in my mind. Then I smiled, pressed the pedal, and let the engine sing. Not for her, not for revenge, but for the boy I used to be, the one who stayed when everyone else left. A few weeks later, I got a small envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a note, handwritten. "Thank you for not hating me. You were the lesson I didn't know I needed. I hope life gives you everything real. M." I sat there for a long time, reading it again and again. No bitterness, no mockery, just truth, the same truth I'd been chasing all along. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Some endings don't require words. That night, I met Sam for dinner. He raised a glass. To the man who went from Civic to CEO. I laughed. To the man who believed I could. We clinked glasses. He grinned. "So what's next?" "Another car." I shook my head. "No." A new chapter. Driving home, the city glowed around me. Tall buildings, neon signs, reflections of a life that once felt unreachable. I passed a group of teenagers on the sidewalk, taking photos beside an old Honda Civic parked by the curb. One of them said, "Man, this thing's a classic." I laughed quietly to myself. They had no idea. That night, before heading to bed, I walked to the garage. The Lamborghini sat there like fire and metal, perfect and still. Next to it, the Civic, dusty, dented but undefeated. Two stories parked side by side. One of pain, one of pride. Both mine. People talk about success like it's a destination. They think you wake up one day, step out of a Lamborghini, and suddenly you've arrived. But what they don't tell you is that real success doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like stillness, a quiet peace that comes when you finally stop needing to prove anything. It had been 3 years since the night she laughed at my Civic. 3 years since her perfume lingered in that passenger seat, reminding me of what I lacked. Now, that seat sat empty, not because no one would sit there, but because I was finally okay driving alone. The company had grown beyond anything I'd imagined. We weren't a startup anymore. We were a story, one taught in classrooms, quoted in podcasts, and celebrated by the same people who once told me I was dreaming too small. I've been invited to speak at an international entrepreneurship summit in Dubai, a place built on ambition and sand, where every skyscraper looked like a dare against gravity. I decided to go. The auditorium was filled with entrepreneurs, investors, and dreamers in expensive suits. I wore a black tux and a calm I hadn't felt in years. When it was my turn to speak, the host introduced me as the man who turned heartbreak into horsepower. The audience laughed, but I smiled because it wasn't far from the truth. I walked onto the stage, microphone in hand, lights blazing down. And I said, 3 years ago, someone refused to sit in my old car. So, I built a journey she'd never catch up to. But here's the thing, the car was never the problem. It was the mindset inside it. A hush fell over the crowd. If people leave you because of where you are, let them. Because they were never meant to see where you're going. Some passengers are only meant for short rides, and when they get out, it's not rejection. It's redirection. The applause that followed wasn't thunderous. It was emotional. The kind that hums in your chest long after it ends. When I stepped off stage, I realized something. I wasn't talking about revenge anymore. I was talking about growth, the kind that no luxury car can measure. That night, back in my hotel suite overlooking the Persian Gulf, I received a message on Instagram. The profile name stopped me for a moment, Melissa. "I saw your speech." I cried. "I finally get it now. You didn't change for anyone. You changed for yourself. And that's why you won. I'm proud of you, truly." I stared at the screen for a while, then typed back slowly. Thank you. I hope you find your own road, too. She replied with a single heart. Not the flirty, hollow emoji I remembered, but a simple one, like a punctuation mark at the end of a long, painful sentence. And just like that, it was over. For good this time. When I flew back to the city, the sun was rising, that faint orange light spilling across the highway. I drove straight to the outskirts, to the same old mechanic shop where I'd bought the Civic years ago. The car had been sitting there, gathering dust, waiting for something I didn't know I was ready for. The mechanic, an old friend, smiled when he saw me. You finally come to sell it? I shook my head. No, I came to restore it. He chuckled. You sure you want to fix this old thing? You've got a machine worth 10 of these now. I smiled. That's the point. We spent 2 weeks working on it. New paint, new seats, same soul. When it was done, the Civic gleamed under the sun, proud, reborn, and still humble. I took it for a drive through the same streets that once embarrassed me, the same corners where she'd rolled her eyes. This time, there was no laughter, no shame, just the sound of tires on asphalt and the whisper of wind through the open window. Sometimes, you don't have to leave your past behind. You just have to rebuild it until it feels like home. A few months later, I met someone new, Maya. She wasn't flashy. She didn't care about brand names or price tags. She cared about sunsets, street food, and purpose. She listened more than she spoke, and when she laughed, it didn't sound like mockery. It sounded like music. On our third date, I offered to pick her up. What are we riding in? She asked playfully. I tossed her the keys. You tell me. She walked to the garage, eyes widening at the 2 cars, the Lamborghini on one side, the Civic on the other. Without hesitation, she pointed to the Civic. That one. I smiled. Why? She shrugged. Because it feels like you work for it. And just like that, I knew she wasn't here for the ride. She was here for the journey. Months passed. Maya became part of my world, not as an accessory, but as a mirror that reflected my peace back at me. She'd ride with me in the Civic when we wanted to talk, and in the Lamborghini when we wanted to dream. Both cars, both versions of me, whole, reconciled. One night, while we were driving through the city, she asked, Do you ever think about her? The one who refused the old car. I thought for a moment, then said, Sometimes, but not with anger. She was the wrong passenger, but the right lesson. Maya smiled. Then maybe she did you a favor. Maybe, I said. Sometimes rejection is just the universe's way of clearing the passenger seat. She laughed softly. Remind me never to underestimate your metaphors again. Years later, when the Drive Fund became a global foundation, I was invited to deliver its annual keynote. We'd funded over 1,000 small entrepreneurs, people who started with nothing but grit. I decided to title my speech, The Car That Built Me. On stage, I told the story, not of heartbreak, but of transformation, of how an old Civic taught me humility, how failure became fuel, how laughter became ignition, and how love, real love, doesn't sit in luxury, it sits beside effort. When I finished, the audience rose to their feet. Cameras flashed, and as I walked off the stage, I looked up at the giant screen behind me, a photo of both cars parked side by side. Underneath, the words, She refused to sit in my old car, so I built a road she'd never drive on. And then, I stopped looking back. That night, back home, I stood in my garage again, the Civic on one side, the Lamborghini on the other. I placed my hand on both hoods, whispering, one carried my struggle, the other carried my peace. Then I turned off the lights and walked away, not with pride, but with gratitude, because in the end, she refused to sit in my old car. So I learned to drive alone, and that, more than the Lamborghini, was the real victory.